So welcome everybody. It is so good to see all of you. Some of you I haven't seen in a while. Some of you are brand new to me. And some of you it's been like since yesterday or the day before. So it's lovely to have the mix here. I also know that there are some people who have typed questions into the chat box that weren't able to be here in person. So I promise you we're going to cover those questions that showed up in the chat box. The reason I created this, and I know I created it last minute, and I want to thank you all for seeing the notification on it and jumping on in. I created it last minute because I noticed I was feeling heading into 2025. I wasn't feeling what I normally feel at the new year, which is new possibilities and new opportunities. Instead, I felt this kind of constriction going on inside of me. And that constriction is often there for people who are on a grief journey, right? Going into a new year seems overwhelming. It's a lot to take on board. Um, and because for those who are grieving, there's an open vulnerability there that the world is going through this right now. And I heard this echoed this entire last week. I heard this echoed by a lot of people. I realized that for people who are grieving, you might be feeling that even more keenly because you are experiencing in your grief journey a natural hesitation or not excitement. You may be used to excitement in the new year, but that's not your experience right now. And you might be experiencing that even more if you are sensitive to world energies right now. So for a second, I just want to talk about the world energies without going into the politics of the thing. I know there are a number of you who live in the States. Not everybody here lives in the States, but there are a couple of you here who live in the States. I know that at the end of this month, um, the new president will be sworn in. This isn't about politics. This is instead about what's happening worldwide. And what happens in the US does impact us all in the world. And there's an anxiety and there is a chaos. And so what's important for us is to remember how to use the resources that we may already know are available to us, how to find the resources that we most need if we're not sure how to go about that, or be reminded of how we do that. And for those of us who anchor into a spiritual connection, it is so important for us to remember to stay prayed up. Do y'all know what I mean when I say prayed up? I'm seeing some people nod yes, but not everybody. So I'm just going to explain what I mean by prayed up. I'm not talking about a religion now. I'm talking about a spiritual base that we can connect into. When we are grieving, it is right and natural, or it is a right and natural part of the process that we can go through uh, uh, kind of crisis of faith, we'll call it. Okay. The crisis of faith is very specific when we've lost a loved one. When we've lost a job or we've lost a lifestyle, the crisis of faith looks a little bit different. Crisis of faith is a crisis that says that which I have anchored my belief system into is rocking, and it's rocking to the core. And I don't know where or how to find safety and stability here now. So in this world where we recognize chaos is happening, it's already happening, and we're worried that chaos is going to happen more because of our particular circumstance or because of an external circumstance, finding what we can anchor into becomes all the more important. Staying prayed up simply refers to whatever your belief system is, whatever your spiritual connections are, whatever you perceive keeps you in a stable, calm place where you can handle whatever is coming your way. That's the practice that we need to embrace. The most important resource for you will be whatever keeps you in that anchored place. When we're grieving, having an anchor that we can return to regularly when we're flailing is really important. right? It's why I run the HMR program as a weekly program where I am weekly live with people who are grieving, because you need that live anchor, right? You need that anchor where you know at least once a week we're coming together and we can breathe together, right? Because it is so hard sometimes just to breathe. So we want to be able to do that. The resources that you most want to find and the supports that you most want to find are the people that are part of your wellness group. So one of the things I talk about in the book is your wellness team. And for those of you who have heard this before, bear with me. There are people who have never heard this before. What we know to be true when we're suffering a loss is that our friends will break into thirds. One third will be neither helpful nor harmful. They'll be part of a neutral third. They won't really know what to say to us. They won't really know how to be with us. But they're not going to harm us. They're not going to do anything because they don't want to upset us. They're not going to do anything that will jolt us, right? We need to see in this time of chaos who's part of our wellness team that is our neutral third, that isn't going to bring up the political conversation, isn't going to bring up the conversation that would rock our world. Who is that neutral person, or who are those neutral people in our world? Because to have those neutral people in our world, those are the people we get to go out and socialize with and be kind of surface joyful with. And that's going to be important. It's important to find the people that we can forget about our worries for, 2 hours or 3 hours. So we don't want to say they're neutral, so we don't really need them. Those neutral people can be very important when we're not willing to go into a deep dive. Then we have the group of people who are harmful. They're going to sit and sit on our nervous button, right? They're going to sit on that thing that is so uncomfortable for us. And they may do it knowingly. Most of them don't. Most of them are coming to it completely innocently. When we're grieving, these are the people who are giving us advice that we absolutely never asked for. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay. We've got some hands raised, right? So those people who give advice that you never asked for are trying to rescue you, and it's because your nervousness is making them nervous. That's not part of your helpful third. That's really part of a group of people who you need to stay away from for a short period of time. It may not be forever, but while you're going through any kind of a shaking or quaking in your faith conversation, those are not the people to turn to, because they're going to give you misinformation, right? And that's going to not serve you well. The people you really want to pay attention to are the people who are in your positive third. These are the people who are willing to have the conversations that you need to have right now. If you need to talk about your loved one who is no longer with you, they're happy to have you talk. They don't need to guide the conversation. They're happy to let you be the person to have the conversation. If you are in a time in your life right now where you are exploring new things, and this is something that came up in the chat, so I want to make sure to mention it. So there comes a time for people who lost their spouses where now suddenly, whether they went looking for it or not, and for many of them, it's a not. I never went looking for somebody, but there they are. He or she showed up in my world, and now what do I do? And that now what do I do involves all kinds of emotions that come up, which can include guilt, it can include shame, it can include a confusion of what does this mean for the relationship with the person who died and the relationship with the person who is with me right now. Somebody in the chat box also wrote, how can I find somebody when what I've already had is perfection? And that's a really tricky one, because again, there is this idealization that can also happen with people who have died. And what we need to remember is Death ends a life, not a relationship. You've all probably heard me say this or seen me write it somewhere along the way because I do it every day of my working life. What that means is death ended the life of your beloved, but it did not end your relationship with them. So finding a new relationship here now doesn't negate the relationship that continues on. The love is still there, and the love can even inform the new relationship if you can hold the space for both. And that's the key. This is a developmental stage for both relationships right now. And so the confusion that you may be going through, and unless I know the specifics, it's hard for me to talk in other than general ways about this. But if this new relationship coming in is coming in for purpose, and it wouldn't be there if it wasn't coming in for purpose, let's be honest about it, right? Then to get curious about what is the purpose of this relationship and how does my love relationship with my beloved, who's no longer here physically, how does that inform this new relationship? That's a great inquiry to just sit with. How does the love that I've experienced before and the love that I am experiencing in our continued connection inform this? I had a client once where we went down this exploration and inquiry. And inquiry simply means it's a question that I'm going to sit with. It's not a question that I'm now going to drive for the answer. I'm not going to journal until I get the answer. An inquiry is a gentle curiosity. And when we can come to it with a gentle curiosity, then it's amazing the thoughts that show up in the shower. It's amazing the thoughts that show up as we're driving. It's amazing the thoughts that show up as we're half awake and half asleep. It's because the inquiry seed is asking the question of our higher self, of the part of us that actually knows the answer. And it's even the part of us that is connected with our beloved. It's how our beloved is communicating with us now. So if that love and if our beloved has something to say about this, if you sit in a place of gentle inquiry and curiosity around it, I guarantee you the answer is coming. Right? And those answers can lighten the guilt. So I was going to tell you about a client that I had when I was in hospice, where we were sitting with this inquiry, and the answer came back, don't you know I brought him to you? I brought him to you because I don't want you to be alone. I really just don't. And the minute she was able to hear those words, literally, I saw her shoulders relax. I saw her breathe deeper. There's nobody outside of you who's going to give you the message. There's nobody outside of you that's going to talk to whatever guilt you're experiencing, whatever fear you're experiencing. Because let's face it, it's not just um, guilt that I'm cheating. I've heard this play out in numerous ways. I've heard it played out as guilt that I'm cheating. I've heard it played out as what happens after we die? Who am I going to be with? I've heard it played out as I've gone through so much pain with this. Why would I set myself up for losing somebody again? I couldn't do it again. Like the thoughts that come to you when you're at this point in your stepping back into life, we'll call it. Because really what grief does is, as we spoke about in the last HMR meeting, you become cocooned, right? It's like a butterfly. Actually, it's like a caterpillar that's gone into the cocoon and you're in this gelatinous state. Then eventually your wings grow and you start beating those wings against the chrysalis and the chrysalis starts to break. Well, now what's happening is butterflies emerging and it's attracting other butterflies. And what do I do with this? There's a whole myriad of responses and reactions that could come of this. What is the truth about this? Only you know. In the same way that only you know the way through your grief journey. There's nobody outside of you who can tell you what your next steps are. What can help you and what can support you is, again, in the wellness team conversation, having people with you who can listen to your questions and your inquiry without them giving you their answers. That's how you know you've got a good one, right? You've got somebody who's part of your third that is really helpful and loving third when you can speak and they're not answering your questions for you. They're simply witnessing and validating your question. That's how you know you've got somebody really important and you want to keep that person in your life. Okay. Is what I'm saying so far making sense? I hope there haven't been too many video glitches. I know my internet has been really dicey. And I got a handy dandy new piece of equipment that's supposed to boost the thing. Thank you for the thumbs up. That helps me to know that it's going well. But it's already been challenged. So we're going to get this figured out in 2025, actually in January. This is my commitment. So what I want to make sure of is people who have that question, that you know that you're walking with people who can hold that inquiry with you, who can help you to hear when you've said something. Because sometimes we're hearing the answer and we're saying something and we don't even hear that we've got the answer, right? So sometimes it's about that. It's about allowing somebody to say, did you hear what you just said? And be reflective back to you. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. And trusting that whatever's coming to you, because sometimes what's coming to you is, you know what, it's not right for me to do this. This doesn't feel right. And so I need to find a way to articulate that. So how do I articulate that without saying no to a gift that's coming my way? Like maybe that's the conversation too. So we need to find where that position is. The way you do it is the way you do every part of your grief journey. You get clear on what the question is, you sit with the inquiry, and you listen for the answer. The way I talk about it is PWC plus C. Some of you have heard me say this before. PWC plus C means I'm going to be present to what's happening in my world right now. So in the scenario we're talking about right now, somebody's come into my world and I haven't even looked for it, or maybe I have looked for it, who knows, right? So I'm present to this new energy coming into my world. I'm willing to see what's really going on here and what this relationship is asking of me and what I want this relationship to become. I'm curious about the information that's coming to me to help me understand this. So in other words, I'm going to set that inquiry about how has my love from the past and my continuing love for my beloved, how is that informing this relationship? I'm going to sit curious with it. And then I'm going to be really courageous. And the courage comes in, I'm willing to do what I hear is true for me to do. That's the courage piece. And sometimes we need to talk a little bit with our fear pieces to get the courage piece bolstered up, you know? In A Course in Miracles, and I am a student of A Course in Miracles, there are two things. There's love and there's fear. What's so beautiful and what's so sacred to me about the grief journey is that my way of talking about the grief journey is we're on a journey from love, where love was expressed in the physical realm, to love, the love that goes beyond the death, because the relationship didn't die, the love continues. So what does that even look like? We don't know. And in the grief journey, we're kind of in this place of there's a past that I long for that will never be mine again. And there's a future I can't even imagine. So I have to walk this with love to get there. So grief is a journey from love to love with love. That's how I talk about the grief journey. And fear comes up. Fear comes up pretty consistently in the grief journey. And it's always about what is the inquiry that's going to keep me present to what's going on right now, whatever the emotion is, whatever the physical symptom is, whatever the mental conjugations or what am I trying to say? The mental constructs, that's the word I'm looking for. Whatever mental construct is running over and over and over in my head right now, how do I unfold that? How do I let that unpack itself in a loving way so that I can hear what's true for me in this? And I can let go of the rest gently, easily. And that's why I talk about a grief journey with ease and grace. Because when we're gentle with ourselves and we recognize that converting grief to mourning, so grief, the internal experience of loss, mourning, the external expression of the loss, converting grief to mourning, that's the healing path. When grief is surfacing and it's ready to go, it can show up like fear. C.S. Lewis said, "I never knew grief looked so much like fear or felt so much like fear." Right? We don't have to be afraid of the emotions that we're going through, as long as we recognize that that emotion is surfacing. It's not meant, it's not our life sentence to be in fear. It's not our life sentence to be sad. It's not our life sentence to long. It's surfacing. That particular symptom is surfacing so that I can work with and through it. That's the conversion of grief to mourning, and it's the conversion of whatever the symptom is with love to whatever the truth is. Right? And so sometimes we need somebody walking with us consistently when we get caught. We all do. Everybody does. I do too, right? We all need that outside set of eyes that can help us when we're feeling caught. So what I wanted to remind you all of, and I'm going to read a little bit from my book. First of all, I just want to pause. Does anybody have any questions? Because I've just put a whole lot of information out there, hopefully in a string that is understandable. I'm seeing nods. I'm thinking we're all on the same page here. I see thumbs up. Excellent. Again, feel free to write notes in the chat box if you do have any questions or queries. So far, I'm not seeing any questions. So what I wanted to talk about is, how do we find the resources that we need when we're in these places? The other group of people that I heard from in the chat box is womb twin survivors. And for those of you who don't know, I am a womb twin survivor. We have at least one other in the group with us right now. Womb twin survivors are people who had twins in the womb and our twin died before we were born. Our first experience of grief was in the womb. And therefore, our experience of life is quite different than others. The impact of that loss at a time when we couldn't mourn it, and we were born in with that grief, to a family who probably didn't know what it was and couldn't help us with it, and we didn't have conscious awareness of it, it's a big challenge. So to all of the womb twins who are with us here or who will see this recording later, please know that there is a way to convert grief to mourning for womb twins as well. It is a bit more challenging, to be sure, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. And the rewards of doing so are great. Because when you recognize that you're a womb twin or a womb multiple, if you've had multiples in the womb with you, recognizing and identifying those relationships and then being able to mourn those losses frees you. For right now, that's all I'm going to say about it, unless anybody wants to ask me a question specifically about that. So, oh, wonderful. I just see the message that the person who thought I had to leave at 4 doesn't need to. So yay, lovely to have you here straight through. I'm so thrilled to see that. So again, the reading from this chapter in the book will actually help womb twins as well, because there are ways to find what you need, and there are supports for you out there. So page 49, if anybody's following in the book, sorry, page 97, chapter 49 is called Read a Book. There are countless resources that can support us in our grief journey and beyond. The important thing to remember is that we are the experts on our own grief. You will hear me say that time and time again. There is nobody external to you that is the expert on your loss. There's nobody external to you that's the expert on your body. There are doctors who can tell you these symptoms suggest this, but you're the one living in your body. You're the one who's living with your grief. You know the answers. It's about finding the resources that can support you in that. Right? And so then a doctor becomes a resource for you and a support for you. So again, the important thing to remember is that we are the experts on our own grief. Only we know what is right for us. When we find something that feels right, we must pursue it. The early time of grief has a steep learning curve. The person we were when our loved one was alive is no more, and we have yet to discover who we are becoming. We are in a time of exploration, awakening, and enlightenment. Books and other resources can help us with this journey. When in doubt, we must trust that we can simply ask for what we need. The universe always responds. Developing a willingness to listen through our willingness to grieve helps us to acquire a skill set that makes it easier for us to hear the messages that are being sent to us. That's actually why I'm saying for those who are in this place of there's the possibility of a new relationship, or you're wanting to explore a new relationship and you're not sure how to do it, if you're that far into your grief journey and you're coming out the other side now, you know how to hear truth inside of you. You know how to anchor into that truth, and you can lean on that as you're asking these questions. Paragraph number 2. So the way I structured my book, the first paragraph is always the explanation of the conversion technique. Second paragraph is how I have used it. So the second paragraph starts with, many books have influenced me over my life. Books are my go-to when I am confused about something or need to learn about something. And I have to confess, Google has not replaced books for me. I know there are people who Google very quickly and very freely. I'm never convinced that what I'm reading is accurate. So I like books and I go to books, but that's not true for everybody. And if Google is a resource that works for you, then you want to be doing that as well. And you want to do your Google searches. Just be careful with the information that's coming up because it may be misinformation. And there's a lot of misinformation where grief is concerned. So we want to be very careful with any misinformation around grief. During my different grief journeys, books have been both a blessing and a curse. In the early stages of grief, it was impossible for me to read. My brain just couldn't concentrate. And I'm sure some of you have had that same experience and maybe in that place right now, right? And we need to honor when it's too much for our brain, that we just can't do that, right? I learned this while I was grieving my grandmother and my father. By the time I was grieving my mother, I knew not to even try. I discovered books that I could skim through or read one page at a time. Books like Dr. Wofeld's Grief One Day at a Time were invaluable. And if you're not familiar with that book, Grief One Day at a Time, and you are in a grief journey, I strongly recommend that book. And I can put a link into the recording so that you know how to get a hold of that book. Grief One Day at a Time is absolutely invaluable. I also found great comfort in spiritual texts that I had in the house and had not looked at for years. One day, I felt prompted to stand in front of my bookshelf, a bookshelf I walked by every day and never paid attention to. My eye fell to the book I needed to read. As I pulled it off the shelf, it fell open, and there were the words I most needed to hear. I was reminded anew, when we ask, the answers are given to us. That's the key. When you ask, the answers are given. We never quite know how. And in this day and age with Facebook, where you can jump on Facebook and other people's posts come up, do you ever wonder the algorithm that has sent that post to you on that particular day? Right? What algorithm am I in that's the post that came in today? Well, part of what's happened is because now we've got this AI thing happening where we type in a question and now all sorts of things come up that are resources, right? That's training the algorithm. The irony of that is where that's a blessing to us is the answer may come up in what you read. It may be you read it and you say, that's exactly what I needed to see right now. But it may also be you read it and you say, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. Again, trust your insides. That
She'll be back.
did I just freeze on you? Because I saw all of you frozen, and I'm guessing it's not all of you. I'm guessing it's me. Yeah. So uh when I'm just trying to think of the last thing I saw before I saw you all freeze. When I was talking about the algorithms, am I right about that? It was the algorithms. Yeah. So the algorithms will send you messages, but that doesn't mean the message is to be believed or that the messenger is to be believed. Because there are things that come up where you read it or you hear it or they're speaking and they're saying something and you go, that's exactly what I needed to hear. The other day, it was the second time this came into my feed, and it was an actor talking about a quote that he just loves from, I think it was a Shaw quote, George Bernard Shaw. And it just spoke to my soul, and it was what I most needed to hear that day. I don't know how that landed in my feed, but I don't care. It's what I most needed to hear. There are other times something lands in my feed and I can't stand it. It's like, that is absolutely not true. Here's the key. The blessing is both. The blessing is the one that speaks to you. There's also a blessing in the one that you react harshly against. It's still information for you. That's still resourceful for you because now you know what doesn't work for you. We need to make sure that we're discerning, not judgmental, but discerning about what is truthful for us and what is not truthful for us. And remember again that we are the experts for us. That may be true for you. It does not hold true for me. And we can be respectful for others and still say, but that's not right for me. Okay. That I think is going to be very important as we go into 2025, because in many countries, and I've got Canadians on here, I've got Americans on here, these are two countries that are very divided right now, right? And there are many other countries in the world that are quite divided. So it's going to be really important that part of our resources as we anchor into our truth, that we are respectful of other people and their truth, even if it is not our truth. That's part of what we're being called up to do. Okay. So far, so good. It's making sense. Excellent. I just want to make sure. Sorry, there's somebody who's just coming in, and I just want to make sure that we've got we've got mic off. Could you do me a
Oh,
favor? Turn your mic off so that the video doesn't go to you, because we are recording right now. There we go. I got you muted. There we go. It's lovely to have you here, and I don't want you to feel like you're not welcome here. It's just I want to make sure, because we are recording and this will go public, that if you're not wanting to be seen, that you're not seen. So, so I muted you. You're fine to turn your camera on. You won't be seen. So moving on in this chapter, the next part of the chapter is, hi, it's great to see you there. It's the getting started part. So how do we take what I just spoke about finding a book, and how do we find the right resource for us? Well, it starts with heart point number one, and I don't do bullet points. I do heart points in my book. Heart point number one, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and ask yourself, what book or resource has the words I most need to hear right now? Listen for the answer, then connect with the resource. You will be glad you did. So we have no idea what's in our memory banks right now. We've heard about books that we never even looked at. We received books that we've never even opened that are sitting on our bookshelves. We know of books that that we've read and that we've devoured, and we've since forgotten the key lessons in them. But our memory has all of that in it. And we act like an encyclopedia on demand. So it is possible in that inquiry conversation, because remember before I was talking about an inquiry is a gentle question, and we're asking our inner wisdom to reveal to us what do we most need. So when you take a deep breath and you close your eyes and you ask yourself earnestly, what book or resource do I most need right now? I've done that and I've immediately been told, type this into Google, right? And now I've got a search, and the very first thing that pops up is exactly what I need. Didn't even know it existed. Or it's the person that I most need. Didn't even know they existed, right? The next thing is I've closed my eyes and I've seen the cover of a book, and it's like, where did I put that book? I know I own it, and I've had to go to the library to take it out of the library because I can't find where I've got my own copy of it, right? It's packed up in a box somewhere. But again, it was the right and perfect book because I have in my memory banks the cover. I know what that looks like. Or an author comes to me, right? Trusting our inner is key. Is that a question there, or it's just a scratching of the head? We're just scratching the head. All good. Okay. Um, hard point number 2, make a list of books that you A, find comforting, B, that you enjoy, C, that you've heard about that you would like to read, and D, that you find inspiring. You want to have these different lists of books so that you can simply scan the list and see if you can find where you need to go for your next piece of information. So again, it's books you find comforting, books you enjoy, books you have heard about that you would like to read, and books you find inspiring. When you feel in need of support, encouragement, entertainment, or inspiration, and entertainment is important because it rests your brain, it rests your anxiety, right? Look at the list you made. Let your eyes drop to the book that would support you most in this moment. It doesn't mean you need to read the whole book, because you can do exactly what I did when I was describing this. The book fell from the shelf and just opened to the right and perfect page. So you just let it open to the right and perfect page. It's, by the way, a great way to use this book is to just let it open to the right and perfect page, since all chapters are just 2 pages long anyway. It's easy peasy. Literally written for the grief brain, this book. Finally, when in doubt, stand in front of your bookshelf and see what title jumps out at you. And I mean that both figuratively and literally, right? See what your eye drops to, but you might be surprised. There might be a book that just leaps out of the shelf and onto your feet, because sometimes that is the way it works. The idea here is to always give yourself permission to ask the question, what do I need most right now? Even if you don't think you need anything right now, what do I need most right now is a wonderful question to ask yourself, and just sit with the answer. Because I'll be in the middle of a hectic day, because now I've trained myself to do this, when I'm not thinking straight anymore and I'm making mistakes. And so I just pull a full stop, and I close my eyes and I take a deep breath and I say, what do I most need right now? And the resource that is coming to me is a cup of tea, right? Because the Brits have it right. Keep calm and sip a cup of tea. It's absolutely true, right? The resource doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be a course. It doesn't have to be a lesson. It can be a support for this moment in time. And finding what would support you most in this moment in time, that's the key. So, of course, I have programs that hopefully can support should you need that support. I have my HMR program. HMR stands for Healthy Mourning Revolution. And it's because I want to revolutionize the way people think about grief and mourning. In North America, we run from it. In North America, we are grief avoidant, but we're mourning phobic. We just will not go to the mourning piece. And when we understand that the mourning piece is what will actually get us through, that's when the magic happens. That's when it can really happen with ease and grace. So, of course, I have my book, I have my program. I have the program running on a special right now. I'm going to put all of the links into the recording. And if you have questions, you can always call me and ask me questions about it. But this weekly program where we get to sit together and connect with each other and find out how each other's week is going. And then we can talk about what is the conversion technique of the week. We're going to go through one chapter, just like we just went through one chapter. But how does that chapter inform your week? What is it that you're committed to doing this week that will help move you into converting your grief to mourning? That's the key. Because the subtitle of the book is 52 Ways to Convert Your Grief to Mourning with Ease and Grace. That's the whole intention, right? And I know we've got people on this call who have benefited from that program or continue to benefit from that program. And I'm just so honored to be part of that journey with you. I'm so honored that I got to walk with you in that space, because that's a tender space. The womb twin chats, those are for womb twins and womb multiples, and we meet once a week as well. And that is a lifeline for everybody who's in it. I feel confident in saying, and I see some nods happening because we do have people here who are part of that womb twin group. That womb twin group meets once a week on Wednesday mornings at 8:30 Pacific time. You can do the translation for your time. And what's so beneficial about that group is that it's a touchstone with like-minded people who are experiencing the same kind of journey you are. So even though it's not the exact same thing you're experiencing, the way you're experiencing it, the way you're understanding what's happening in your world, everybody understands in the group. The way you're processing what's happening in your world, everybody understands in the group. And for womb twins, that's a very rare thing. So that becomes quite magical. Olga is my co-host in that. We co-facilitate that program. She's in Ireland. It's why we start so early, because it's late. It's 4:30 her time. And we're going to be doing another free introduction session. So for anybody who's interested in the Womb Twin Chat, the reason we do introduction sessions is because if you're new to Womb Twin and you're not sure if this will work for you, we want to make sure that we do an introduction session with all of you first, so that you try it out, you feel what it's like. We have a group that that welcomes new people very readily, but we want to make sure that it's a good fit and match for you. So it's a complimentary session for that. I do private consultation as well. I do a Flex Pass, and I've got a special deal on the Flex Pass as well, because you've been in attendance here. So I will put that into the link as well. The whole idea of the Flex Pass is sometimes you just need a 15-minute touch up, right? Sometimes you just need, this is going on in my life and I'm really not sure. Can we just talk about it? And then we have up to 3 hours. But if we only use 15 minutes, we only use 15 minutes, and then it's 2 hours, 45 minutes left on the pass. Or we might go for an hour and a half. I always book off an hour and a half so that I'm not rushed to go anywhere. But if you know that we're just coming in for a short period of time, then we can come in for that short period of time, we can talk about it, and then we're done with it. And you've got all that time saved. I don't think hours work for us. And when somebody's in grief brain, quite frankly, sometimes you need an hour and a half, and sometimes you really just don't. And there's no sense in pushing it if you don't need that amount of time. Doesn't do anybody any good. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that my website is still up and running. For those of you who know it, you know it well, healthymourning.com. Everything you need to know is there. And if you just want to give me a call and talk to me, we can talk and see how I can best be of support to you. But know that I send love and support to you wherever you are in your journey, whatever the challenge is right now. None of us are in this alone. That's the key. None of us are in this alone. 2025 will be what we make of it, because outside circumstance does not determine who I am and how I show up, right? In order for that to be true when times are challenging and times are divisive, we need to, as we said in the first 5 minutes, we need to pray up, right? We need to anchor into whatever it is that allows us to know that whatever the external circumstance is, we're safe, we're okay. And when the outside circumstance hits so close to home as being a grief that has completely rocked our world and changed our world, we need the people that will remind us, for this minute in time, we're safe. And whatever's coming up, we can walk through it together. You do not need to do this alone. I can't impress that upon you enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording now so that we can have an open chat with nobody worrying about being on the recording. So let me just stop it. And for those of you who are watching the recording and want to know more, look in the description section and all the links are there. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Namaste.